Good morning. Good morning, Joe. Good morning,
Good
Dr. Joe Hag.
morning.
And good
Hi.
morning, Tim. Good morning to
Morning.
everybody watching us on LinkedIn, YouTube, probably Facebook and Twitter, listening to us in Clubhouse. And it's a pleasure to have you with us once again this morning, Wednesday, on November 27th. And once again, welcome to Dr. Joe Hug. You have already heard about him, you have met him probably, but let me just make a brief introduction. So, Dr. Joe Hug is a polymath, entrepreneur, angel investor, academic researcher, and financial and business analyst. And we're very fortunate to have him with us once again as a guest speaker so that he can tell us about another Japanese hidden gem, a company that has been in operation for a very long time. Hopefully, we can learn from this company as well because there are a lot of things that we can actually extract from what Dr. Hug tells us. And I would call you Joe just for the sake of friendliness and also to make this podcast a little bit, let's say, more relaxed. So, of course, I would like to say also thank you to our sponsors. The first one of them, that is Kanchu at kanchu.com, and James Howell, who do real estate buying and selling real estate in Tokyo and Yokohama. They also do commercial property management. And if you have any projects in mind, please reach out to James on LinkedIn. We have been working with them for a while and they have become also our friends. And we feel fortunate to have this opportunity to promote them to all of you who are listening to us. So, thanks a lot for this. And Joe, I cannot wait to hear what you have prepared for us today, this morning.
Yeah, thank you. And good morning to everybody who's listening or wherever you're at in the world. But I'm really excited for today's company that we're going to be highlighting because it's a bit of an unusual sort of a business, not your typical manufacturing type that you expect, or some sort of uh, mainstream kind of business. So yeah, it's pretty exciting. I hope some of you who like history and of
Mhm.
course Japanese culture enjoy it.
Right.
So I hope Tim will like it. I'm sure. I hope so.
I
Right?
always
Yeah.
enjoy it. I always enjoy your
Right.
stories.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
thank you, sir. Thank you. Thank you. um, yeah. So we had I send my research students all over Japan and different cities, and they visit these small, as Maya introduced, these small companies that have been in business for a number of years, typically over 50. And according to a German researcher who came up with the definition, they're called hidden champions, right? So uh, the name takes a little bit of getting used to, but I like it now.
All right.
So today's hidden champion is actually document restoration. And quite an interesting story of an entrepreneur who came up with this business. And again, it's kind of this resilient story of a company that came about because of a need or a change of life. Something happened and created the opportunity. Well, someone who could see an opportunity, anyways. And so the story today is about this document restoration company. Again, like last time we discussed, they pivoted, right? They started some kind of business industry, but then something happened and they had to pivot. And so that's what created the company eventually and where they're at now. So pretty fun. Yeah.
Okay.
So you know the saying, right? Don't judge a book by its cover, right?
Right.
So of course I had to go into the internet and find out where's that come from. Because these English expressions, sometimes you don't know where they come from, right?
Yeah.
Either of you know where it might come from? You can't cheat, Maya.
I'm on the edge of my seat. I want to know.
No,
Right?
I really
You
don't
piqued my
know.
interest.
Right?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, because let's be honest, sometimes as ambassadors of our own countries that we come from, and we're here in Japan, people in Japan want to know, and so they ask us sometimes these expressions or vocabulary. Where did it come from, or what does that mean, or how do I use it? So I looked it up. AI helped me a little bit, and I found out that it's a murder mystery book
Oh,
where the expression came from, where it was most popularized.
Huh. How long
Obviously,
ago? How
interesting.
perhaps
long ago?
Okay.
1946.
Okay, not that long ago. Not that
No.
Not too
long
long
ago.
ago.
Wow. Okay.
According to our timeline, not too long ago.
Yeah, well, I was minus 12.
Minus
I was
12.
negative 12 years old. Yeah.
I think I was
So,
minus a few years. Yeah, pretty near.
yeah. Yeah.
So 1946
Okay.
murder mystery book. Yeah,
Well,
pretty
okay.
interesting. So yeah,
So,
Maya, if you could show us the first slide there, and because I come from an academic background, I have to prepare slides, right? It's
Yes.
oh my
fun.
God.
It's fun to have visuals. Uh, so the original quote from the book is here. You can see it. You can never tell a book by its cover. So obviously there's different variations that people express, but I thought that this was going to be really nice because it introduces the company. Again, they restore items, papers,
Mm-hmm.
books, etc. So I thought, hey, that's a nice kind of way to lead into the story. Yeah. Maya, can you show us the second slide? Oh, there's a
Yes.
cat.
I'm sorry, she wants to be
Oh,
included. So,
hello, cat.
yes, say hello for.
Hello. Wow. Cute.
Okay.
So now
That,
this is what I'm going to do. This is really cool because these are the main topics that we're going to cover, right?
Wonderful. Mm-hmm.
The history of the company and some of the takeaways. But in the end of today, um, I'm going to include some additional words that kind of explain how the company transformed over time. But these topics remain the same, anyways. Um, so let's begin with the niche focus. So, give you a little bit of background. This company started really from a dark reason, right? An origin. So the owner of this company was working in another traditional business, right? He was working. He was 35 years old when his company actually went bankrupt. Now he was just a worker, right? He didn't own that other company or anything. He was just your simple run of the mill day to day worker, and his original company went under. And at 35, you can imagine that is a huge life changing event. What do you do, right? You're not you're not too young to be competitive, and you're not too old to say, okay, I can retire, right? So you're kind of in the middle of the
Indeed.
road. It's tough. It's a tough time. Have either of you ever heard of somebody who at 35 had to make such a life decision? What do you do? What would you do, right?
yeah.
Um,
Yeah,
Yeah. I think
I
so.
especially.
I think 35, you're still pretty resilient. And I think you're kind of at the peak of your, I don't know, the intersection between experience and you're starting to figure things out.
mm,
So I don't think it's a horrible age for it to happen because you still got energy and resiliency if you got the right personality. But for anybody at any age, it's tough. I agree, you
Yeah.
know.
At the same time, I think that at the time that this happened, it was really difficult for 35-year-olds to find a new job because everybody was into lifetime employment, And once your company went bankrupt, there was that, well, maybe not externally expressed, but still, there was that shame of being part of a team that allowed the company to go bankrupt.
Hmm.
So,
And what
because,
caused it? Yeah,
yeah,
what was the reason for the bankruptcy, Joe?
Yeah, we that wasn't me. That was the cat. uh, we didn't go into the specifics of what happened. To be honest, we should have.
Yeah,
I think that would have been a nice story to hear what happened. But I think, and you'll kind of understand a little bit later. And I think Maya touched upon it when she said it is a little bit of a shame, right? It's you take it personal, right? Like, what did I do
yeah, sure,
personally
for
to
sure.
not help my
Yeah,
company succeed,
failure.
or yeah. But that's a great question, Tim, and I think next time around we will um, kind of try and get more information as to the background of the companies. But yeah, I'm not
But to
sure, to be
Maya's
honest.
point, I was just going to say, to Maya's point, though, it is, I think, worth recognizing that it's harder to recover probably in Japanese society and business than maybe other countries. I think people are more forgiving in my culture of failure because as long as you keep trying, just, even the best fail sometimes kind of mentality. I think it's harder in Japan. So I think that's worth recognizing the grit that
Hmm.
it took to overcome that. And this was what year? Do you know?
This was almost 50 years ago, so yeah, that would have been
50 years ago. Okay,
right.
so 1970-ish, 19 early 70s, early
Hmm.
1970s.
Right.
Okay, and interesting.
The
All right,
peak of Japaneseness.
peak of Japanese, right before the bubble, pre-bubble years.
Yeah, yeah, definitely prior to the bubble. Um,
Yeah,
so, so his original company where he was working went under, and what do you do? So decided I'm gonna, I have to control my own destiny, and that's where the entrepreneurial spirit came in, and his original mentor that he got was helping him to set up the company, and that's how he got started. He took some of the
gotcha.
skills that he had been working with, which was um, working with like wood and picture frames and things like that. Took some of the skills and then tried to transfer them over into what he wanted to do for himself, and have control of his own life. So he got his mentor to help him and started a company. Okay, now we can see the next slide. um,
Okay.
so I think again, the takeaway here then is that success comes from focusing on something that others may not see as an opportunity, or using your own skills uh, that you already have. And when there's a life-changing event and you have a little bit of resilience and a little bit of courage, perhaps you could take that opportunity and do something with it. And so um, that's what he did. So started this company, and again, originally took on some of the same skills, was working with picture frames and things like that before he got into actual paper restoration and book restoration. That was the original idea that he had. However, what happens in teams uh, is that, and mentors, even with mentors, is that we are all human, and eventually there comes a fork in the road where you disagree, or you agree to disagree. Right, as
Yeah,
another saying goes.
and part ways sometimes too. Yeah,
Yeah, exactly. And that's exactly what happened was with his original mentor. um, he had to part ways, and it was again another really tough situation for the CEO, because he really was brokenhearted about that, right? He had learned so much, but that mentor wanted to go one way and he wanted to go a different way, and they just couldn't agree. So a little bit of history. If we can go to the next slide, Maya.
Wait, before we go there, I just so I was looking at the second bullet, operates in a niche market, focusing on museums and exhibitions, right? As fate would have it, I recently took my nephew to the Museum of Art here in Atami. It's up the hill. It's just a fantastic place, really beautiful. And as we were looking at some of these exhibits, some of them are like national treasures, right? So we're talking like, think about that. Like you can't even put a valuation on some of these treasures that they have. And then when I started thinking about somebody has to transfer these to and from the museum because these exhibitions are like, there's limited time, right? And someone has to restore them. It's just funny because I was thinking about that. I go, there must be companies that like specialize in the transportation, the restoration, the preservation, the maintenance. But I wondered, like, I wonder who does this. Like, and are their insurance costs extremely high? I mean, like you couldn't even insure some of this stuff, right? National treasures, for example, right? So, so it's interesting that today this company, because I had no idea what you were going to talk about today. So, just a kind of a nice coincidence because it's something I've just been thinking about.
Well,
Anyway, I just want to make that comment.
I was sending you the vibes.
That might be it. Now we're vibing, man.
Yes.
Or as somebody once told me, it's the same waveform, right?
We're on
Yeah.
the same wavelength.
We're the
Okay,
same.
maybe
Yeah,
we're
sorry,
tuned
wave.
in.
We're tuned in.
Very good.
And I'm going to talk more about that, actually, about the museums and exhibitions, because obviously that was later, right?
Right.
In the beginning, wasn't so wonderful. Um, Yes, and Tim, when you were talking about that, it reminds me of that news story. I don't know where it happened, but there was a church with a painting of the Catholic Jesus, I believe, and a cleaning person or somebody in the church or museum accidentally smudged the painting and then tried to repaint it and it looked more like a manga.
Oh my
Wow,
goodness,
that's terrible.
You know, like a smiley
that
face.
is there.
uh, okay, so going back to the company, and sorry for going backwards a little bit, but a little bit about
That's okay.
the background. But as I mentioned, the original founders' employment company went bankrupt. Um, he did transition over time, taking his skills, starting out with picture frames and things like that, but then thought about how can I keep going, because you cannot earn a lot of money doing that. So uh, got the opportunity to start doing a little bit of restoration, and the rest is history. But you can see at the very top of the slide, it says, a challenge can lead to an opportunity, right? So you have to be able to see these opportunities. And I think I mentioned it before in our meetings that I operate under the tenet of um, windows and doors, right? Life is about windows and doors, right? The doors of
Yes.
opportunity, but also the windows of opportunity. And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes we as as humans only look at the doors. We only look for the big opportunities, the big chances, and we're missing these little tiny
Right.
opportunities.
Yeah.
So I think in this case,
Yeah.
he saw a small opportunity and took it and said, okay, I'm going to go with it.
Mm-hmm.
However, what challenges have we talked about when I talked about other companies in this series, what challenges have you noticed are repeating? And I noticed that when I was preparing these slides, I was like, oh, wow, it's about the same
Right.
challenges. Do you recall some of those challenges that we talked about?
Well, sometimes they just, of course, as you said, there is change in management, but also I think that another thing that happens quite often is that they lose market,
Yes.
right? They lose their customers for some reason or another. So, and it happens, yes, yeah, as you say, to almost every company you have talked about.
Yes. Yes. Some kind of uh, huge loss, right? Whether
Yes.
it's a company or the actual market
Mm-hmm.
uh, disappears. Tim, since we're in Japan, what are some recent things that have happened?
Some recent or
Yes, that,
reason?
that has affected many companies.
Well,
What
ma-
it depends on the time frame. What are you talking about? Like what time frame are you
Let's
talking
say in
about?
the last 30 years.
Um, and this is not original thinking. It was Francis McInerney brought this to my attention.
Oh,
But the software of, like, for example, the iPhone absorbed all these hardware, niches that Japan was really good at, like video cameras and recorders and all these, like it sucked in all of these normally hardware stuff. And Japan, Matsuoka, all the big companies, they lost like that. They didn't see it coming for whatever reason, or they didn't
uh,
adapt. So I mean,
yeah.
that's in terms of a large theme, I think that had a lot to do with it. And then a lot of their stuff now went inside niche, high tech, the stuff you don't see on the label necessarily that runs stuff like chips and things like that. That's kind of what, none of this is original. This is me just, reading and listening to other people. So, yeah,
Yeah. Now that you mention it, you're right. That has happened. A
probably a
kind of a
different, not what you were
consolidation.
expecting,
Very different,
not
but I
the
love
answer
it.
you're expecting. Yeah, yeah.
No, I love it. No, but you're right. It's a consolidation of expertise that different companies used to have in order for some of them to survive while the rest kind of disappear. I remember some of the big names disappearing in Japan in the news recently, right? In the last, at least in the last 10 years. Um, I won't mention any, but there's some names that have kind of gone away, and you're like,
yeah.
wow, never saw
Well,
that kind.
yes, we have. I think that, of course, some Japanese companies they had a lot of trouble because of their processes. Some of the
Right.
processes were uh, problematic. Many companies also focused on reducing costs instead of looking for expansion and for new products. There is another thing I believe that sometimes those companies, they were going for a certain kind of technology, and then a newcomer to the industry came and just with an entirely new idea.
Mm.
And in this sense, I'm
Took it
not
away.
going to mention Japanese companies, but we can talk about, for example, how Apple, took the world by storm, and every other company that was developing smaller phones, mobile phones, and so on, just they had to, you know, uh, dispose of all the R&D they had done in this direction because Apple just took the market.
Hmm.
And
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
yeah,
It certainly caused a big, shift in the focus of things. Um,
right.
in this case, some of the similarities, going back to the original question, but some of the similarities that I started to notice is
Yes.
obviously COVID-19, right? COVID happened, it affected everybody
Yeah,
around the globe.
Yes.
yeah,
But being
for
in
sure.
Japan, one of the other things that happened is the earthquakes.
Mm-hmm.
Earthquakes in Japan Obviously, we're all kind of used to the small ones, but the really big ones not only are natural disasters and you know cause death and destruction, but they can also cause shifts in the marketplace. And in this case,
Yeah.
that's what exactly what happened with this company was that um, because of the earthquakes, they lose customers. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
Total industries will just kind of move away from what they're doing and everything changes, and so they lost a lot of
Mm-hmm.
customers. um,
Yeah.
and so when this happens, you have to pivot, right? You have a
Yes.
challenge, you have to pivot. That I think that's a great takeaway, a great word in entrepreneurship is you really have to be able to pivot uh, while trying to still do what you love and what the customers are asking for. So yeah, the next slide, Maya. So
Yes.
So you mentioned the word pivot, and I
yes.
think that's a good segue for us to quickly pivot
Oh,
to our sponsors at
sponsor, pivot to the
halfway
sponsor.
time. And then we'll pivot right back to what you were about to talk about. See, I
Oh
my
wow, you got your timer.
got
Yes.
my
Thank
timer
you
on
for that
here. All right.
timer.
So go ahead, Maya. I'm sorry.
Well,
Let's
thank you,
pivot time.
and thank you to Tim and Joe for allowing me to do this, but also a huge thank you to the second sponsor of this podcast. This is Houze Inc. So Houze offers bilingual services in custom home design, construction, and renovations. They also work in commercial building construction. If you want to work with them in either Japanese or English, reach out to Hana Urushizawa Howell. She's on LinkedIn. You can also find them online. It is Houze Inc. And you can easily actually get to them and discuss your new project, your next project. It doesn't have to be this year, it could be next year as well. They're out there to help you specify, the parameters and also help you with advice and some ideas. Well, Hana Urushizawa Howell, she's on LinkedIn, and you'll find her contact details in the description of the video on YouTube. Thanks a lot for this. Okay,
And
we
thanks to the
can.
sponsors. Yeah,
Oh
Yes,
yeah.
very
We love
thank you
them.
so much. Yeah, always make a positive impact.
always, yes.
Uh, yeah. So going back to the challenges. So uh, a need to pivot, and in this case, remember we were talking about earlier the museums and such. So that was one of the segments that kind of disappeared. So eventually, they had customers who were museums, um, other document, libraries, etc.,
Mm-hmm.
other document holding places, etc. Uh, when the earthquake happened and when COVID hit, these customers began to disappear because they didn't need those services anymore, or uh, it affected those companies so much so that they just didn't have the funds to continue. So again, the challenge happened to this document restoration company, and he was thinking, "What can I do? What can I do? I want to stay alive. I want to keep my company. I'm older. I can't.
Okay, yeah.
uh, you know, what do you think he did? What would you do? Interesting question there.
It is an interesting question, and honestly, I think that I would be at a loss for a while, and then I'll
Right.
start looking for opportunities where I can still use some of my core capabilities, right? Because they were obviously good at restoration of paper books, maybe bamboo scripts and scrolls, and so on. And probably I would try to find an application of this capability. But
Yeah.
honestly, I don't know what they did, and I am not sure that if I were in that situation, I would actually find something that would work for me and the company.
Yeah. I mean, the average person would definitely give up, right? And say,
Hmm.
"Oh,
Yeah.
that didn't work."
The average person would struggle to find a hole in the market that matched his or her talents. Like to
Yeah.
me, being able to see that hole to fill,
Mm-hmm.
that's
Yeah,
that's the trick. Like, who has that ability? And I'm not, can't say I do. I'm not sure. I'd look for something to survive, but I don't know if I probably wouldn't have found what he found. You know what I mean?
right.
So he obviously had a kind of vision. You got to be able to
Mhm.
like
Mm-hmm.
pick those opportunities out, right? So hats off.
Yeah.
So
And if you don't mind me adding, in such times of crisis, it's really difficult for us to rise and try to have a bird eyes vision, right? Because we get immersed in the experience of losing that
Right.
the
the
business
weeds too. Yeah,
weeds, yes. And it's so difficult
yeah,
actually to stop being emotional and
Mm.
become entirely rational and think about, okay, this is what we can do. So what can we do forward, or how can we apply our
yeah.
skills and our capabilities on,
Right.
even this tiny niche here.
Yeah.
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 What's
Yeah. No,
within
I
our
agree.
what's within our capability that will
Right.
generate revenue?
Right.
I mean, that's really,
Maybe
yeah.
that's why they say that if you really want to lead a business, you have to be emotionally intelligent. And I think it's difficult to be such, right? For many
Yeah,
people, it
yeah,
is.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. I won't really go into it because it's kind of personal, but
Right.
I had a low point myself, and I I never really thought about survival until I hit that point, and then um, after that, I I've changed a lot. I've changed to the point where I'm comfortable trying things. Before that, I
Mm-hmm.
was, I just wanted the comfort of of
Comfort zone.
how
Yeah,
life
yeah,
was. Yeah, yeah.
Right.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
But with this company, what he did was like, okay, so I lost many of my customers. I've lost the contracts. I've lost some of the industries that I was doing business with. What I do? So what he started doing was holding workshops.
Oh, right.
I saw that. I saw that bullet. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. So like
Yes.
yeah,
both of you said, using the skills that you've got, and then seeing how do I apply that? How do I use that? And said, okay, I'm going to start doing some workshops and teaching people and sharing some of the wealth of knowledge that he had, but also making money from it, right? To keep
Yes.
the company going.
Mm-hmm.
And the workshops were quite popular. It's an industry nobody really thinks about.
That's
Nobody wants.
true.
Very few people
Yeah.
say, "Ooh, I want to be a document restorer," right?
But it also
right, right.
strikes me as something that is quite typical for Japan, because Japan has this long culture, or long tradition of paper
Mm,
making, right?
mm,
Paper
mm,
production, and they're very proud of the different kinds of paper they produce. So some types of paper are actually pieces of art. They're works of art, and I can see how genius that idea was, actually, to spread the knowledge among the people here, the general public, probably some companies as well, and to teach them how to preserve those pieces of art once again, because it actually taps into that love of tradition in the
right.
Japanese culture and among the Japanese population, which is genius, really. And honestly, I wouldn't
Right.
have thought about this at all.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
And
same
I was,
here. Yeah.
yeah, I was gonna like, so I recall back when I worked in manufacturing, the company I worked for, we had a niche technology. It was called insert molding. And not a
Mhm.
lot of companies like were really good at this, right? And my boss, I was in sales,
Right.
he said, we want customers that either are extremely knowledgeable about what we do or don't know anything. It's the
Mm,
people in the middle that know enough to be dangerous that try to make us do stuff that's impossible because they don't have the knowledge. And
right.
so we want to avoid those kind of customers. But if we do have them, we have to educate them.
Right.
And, as part of your sales pitch, when whatever, when you quote something, you have to walk them through the processes. But even then, there's a limit to, they know enough to be dangerous, right? So that kind of made me recall getting into the training industry. It makes sense, even in my niche.
Yeah, and I think also by doing this, you you grow the interest, you grow potential future customers, because
Yes,
the word gets out, and oh, there's this company doing
Right.
this, and
indeed.
so you're kind of helping yourself in different ways, not just to earn money,
Right.
but also to
You're promoting yourself in a sense,
exactly, right.
through
You're
education. Yeah,
yeah, educating, right, educating others. Um,
for sure.
certainly, yeah.
Yeah.
So next slide. So this this came to a peak point for the owner where he began to reevaluate. Okay, so I'm surviving. I cannot rely on my previous customers that I used to have, these museums, et cetera, et cetera. Now I've got this other opportunity of educating people and these workshops, and he had to reevaluate what are my strengths and weaknesses. Now, one of the weaknesses, and this is really interesting, and I think this is self-reflection, is he knew that he was not a highly educated person. In fact, during the interview, he says, "I have no education." Now, what does that mean? I'm not sure what he meant by that, but
Right.
you know, meaning he didn't go to he doesn't have a doctorate in document restoration. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
but
Interesting.
I also see that as the Japanese, built-in humility to always keep
mm,
getting better, like to kind of like they remind themselves, oh, I have more to learn, I have more to learn, which
mm,
I admire that. Like I really
right.
admire the constant improving yourself, taking
Yes.
classes. So who knows? But maybe it's interesting. That is interesting.
Yes,
He
it
put
is
it in there.
interesting. At the same time, to me, it is also good to, I think it is worth making the distinction between formal education and practical education.
Yeah,
Right.
for
Because
sure.
in his case, he had all this experience through
Mm,
practice,
mm,
business, which is not formal education, but it still puts him aside or apart from everybody else who has no idea
It's
of,
practical. Yeah,
yes, it's
yeah,
practical and it's very applicable too.
yeah,
So the
for sure.
question is, once again, and I'm deviating a little bit from the topic here, but for everybody watching, so even if you don't have formal education, you can still be successful in what you're doing if you manage to distinguish yourself and your skills from the skills of other
Yeah.
people. But of course, personally, I cannot talk about this much because I also chose the road of formal education myself. So there are always two ways. There are even more than two ways, but either way or any one of them, if as long as it works, I don't see any problems, right? Having just
yeah,
Oh no.
yeah. I mean, uh, even in higher education settings, there's different titles of facilitators, right? So you have your traditional professors and things like that, but then you've got uh, practicing professor. I remember the first time I saw that, a practicing professor. I was like, what is a practicing professor? So
uh-huh.
I had to look it up,
He's
right? And
practicing.
yeah, what
Yes,
is he practicing?
practicing
He's
professorship,
practicing to be a professor.
right?
Someday I hope to be a professor. For now, I'm practicing. No, just
Practice.
kidding.
Don't mind me.
Yeah.
But yeah, which is actually a professor who has the practical experience or expertise
Yeah,
as
in the
opposed
real
to
world.
just book
Yeah,
knowledge.
Right.
yeah, yeah,
Yes.
yeah,
Yeah, so a lot of
yeah.
a lot of universities love those kinds of teachers, facilitators, professors
I
who
agree.
have practical experience. Yeah.
Very valuable.
Oh
I
yeah, yeah,
think that yes, it's really valuable because sometimes, and this is not shared as criticism to academia at all, but sometimes we observe, these things. Well, the trend of people doing research for the research itself, and that research, not all of it, but some of it is not applicable to real life and in real industries.
Yeah.
So I believe that those practicing professors are probably the bridge between pragmatism or things that can be applied in real life and real work and business, and academic research and academia, which is very important. We don't want to have the gap between these two things, right, between academia and academic research
Yeah.
for itself,
Yeah.
and then
Theory in the real world. Sometimes
yes.
theory in the real world, when they meet, there's confusion. So,
Hmm.
so
Quite
marrying those
often.
two together, yeah, marrying the two
Yeah.
together is really where the secret sauce, right? Using that
Yes.
knowledge, but making it work. Yeah, for sure.
Well, well, I'll tell you from a personal experience. Uh, I, of course, obviously, as a child who grew up in extreme poverty, my family did not come from a great lineage, but uh, my dream was to get my doctorate someday, right?
Yeah.
Somehow I made it, but before that, when I was thinking of a school that I was going to attend, I was looking up like how to get a doctorate. What does it take to get a doctorate? Blah blah blah. And one of the things I learned was that you have to defend a thesis, right? You have to defend your
Yes.
research. And I started looking. Oh, what's that all about? So I started looking, and some of the titles of these theses or doctorate degree papers that were being submitted, the titles were like, oh my gosh, you know, what? Why does anybody need to know that?
Right, right, right,
Right.
right, right,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
you know,
Yes. So it
micro
happens. Yeah.
microcosm life of the DNA strings of the blah blah blah. You're like, what?
Right, right. Yeah, yeah,
But you're right. Yeah,
yeah,
practical and theory, when they combine, it's sometimes kind of a clash of understandings. But so through self reflection, the CEO of this company, through self reflection, said, okay, I lost my original mentor, I lost my original customers. I'm shifting, I'm pivoting, I'm finding new ways. I need a new mentor, and so he started to reach out to his new network of people who he had met to find a new mentor, and found a new mentor who understood what he was trying to do, helped him, and through that he began to build a bigger network.
Right.
And because of this bigger network, he's now thriving. The company's thriving now and doing really well. So the takeaway is that I tell my students, also my entrepreneurial students, is you can never do anything alone. You need a network. You need a network.
for
You
sure.
need people to help
Yeah,
you. Not everybody's going to agree with you. Not everybody's going to like you, but you still need some sort of
Right.
network.
And I would say that
yeah,
there is really a silver lining to what you say, that not everybody's going to agree with you and not everybody's going to like you. Actually, you get a lot of more insight from people who dislike you and do
Mm,
not agree with you than
mm,
from people who agree with you, right?
mm,
So there is a lot of merit actually in listening to those who disagree with you.
yeah, I love that. I used to teach courses, critical thinking courses in the University of Tokyo many years ago, and believe it or not, most of my students were from China. I don't know why, but there you go. There you have it.
Right?
Teaching in
Okay.
Japan, teaching in Japan, but the students were mostly Chinese. But one thing I learned from my students was that they loved to challenge things, and they used to say, "Well, no, Joe, I disagree with you," and I actually got used to it, and I loved it, and so now in most courses, I tell my students, if I say something that you disagree with, please let me know, and then tell me
Mhm.
why you disagree, and let's talk about it. So, yeah, I'm with you, Maya. I think that is quite a learning setting that you can learn from others who disagree with you.
Very
Certainly.
much so. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, very much.
Mhm.
Next slide, and we've only got 7 points, so we'll get done in time for Tim to get to
Yes.
To
his
run.
eat sushi for the
Train.
morning, right? Breakfast.
You know, catch my train. Catch my train. We'll be at noon.
Oh,
Sushi
okay.
at
Right.
noon.
Um, so, by expanding the CEO, by expanding his network, by getting a new mentor, was able to develop new leadership skills that helped him improve his company, the services that he was providing, kept up with the workshops as well, and um, a new connection with new kinds of customers that he was able to build. And and so I think the takeaway here is when you're doing self-reflection, you have to look at both the positive and negative, and then see how you can further develop yourself. But at the same
Indeed.
time, what he did was he started saying, okay, now I'm developing fine. Now I got to help my employees develop themselves,
Right.
right?
Yes.
Not so easy.
And why isn't so easy? Is it because there is resistance within a resistance on the side of the
Exactly.
employees? Yeah?
Exactly. That
Okay.
that was the big reason is he started to notice, wow, my employees really are rigid. I mean, that was like a direct quote uh,
Mm-hmm.
for what the CEO said. My employees were quite rigid and were inflexible, unwilling to learn.
It's interesting because I also remember before the pandemic, I went to a very old ryokan. It is in Odawara. And then that ryokan had been in the family, in the same family for about 80 years, or even over 80 years. And when I went there, it was because the ryokan had just changed leadership. Basically, the family called their son, who was working for one of the automotive Japanese companies, and asked the son to take over the
Mm,
uh, the the management, and he did with his wife. But what they shared at that time was exactly the same thing. It was so very difficult to upskill the
mm,
employees because they were very rigid. So they had, every single one of them had their own reasons for not wanting to upskill. And it took about a year to actually persuade most of them. Some of them left, unfortunately, because they didn't want to continue, but most of them stayed. And finally, they did upskill, but it took about a year for the new manager to, convince those people there that it would be better not only for the company, but for themselves as well.
mm.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
I mean, like you said, some people are not going to want to.
Yeah.
I think the how it's framed is also important. And
Mm-hmm.
so I remember I saw a speech by Nimi Shacho, who at the time was president of Toyota North America.
Oh,
And his speech was very memorable because he said, you know, one of the problems I have with some of the North American counterparts is I'll go into the factory one morning and I'll say to the plant manager, so how's the factory? How are things going? He'll say, no problem. And he said, when somebody tells me no problem, I get angry. I said, you have
mm,
no problems? That's a big problem that you don't have any problems. And he goes, in fact, at Toyota, we don't use the word problem. We call it a challenge because we have to look at problems as opportunities and seek them out and celebrate finding problems. And so Toyota has like culturally indoctrinated its employees to see the world in that framing as not negative, you
mm.
know, as an opportunity to
Right,
Yeah.
improve. And then to do that, you have to keep learning, right?
right.
And the challenge, as you said, Maya, to get people to want to change. When I did it, we had to go in and do quick change. Like within, when I say quick, 6 months. The
Mm-hmm.
way we did it was we would invite the employees to define the problem for us, but we'd guide them. And we'd have them draw the conclusion of what the problem was, and we'd have them come up with ideas on how to improve it. And when it's their idea, then they want to do it. And if it's my idea, they don't want to do it, right?
Right. Yes.
So as an approach, that's how we framed it. But
Mm-hmm.
we were teaching them along the way while we were having them do stuff, like how
Right.
to collect data, how to look at it, you know. So we kind of held their hand, but we made it theirs, right? While
Right.
we guided them. But it wasn't easy, like you said. Once you start making those changes, people resist sometimes in very passive aggressive ways. So they're saying
Mm,
the right things, but they really don't want to do it. That's the
mm.
hardest, right? So just some
Yeah.
observations.
We have a similar saying. I don't know exactly the words, but we have a similar saying in the military where we say, um, an unhappy soldier is good news. But
Okay.
when they're happy and say everything's okay, then something is wrong.
Mm.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So
Well, yeah,
yeah.
go ahead.
Oh, go ahead, Maya. Yeah.
No, I wanted to say that probably it's very similar in business and also in the military that when you are happy, you become complacent. And
Right.
complacency doesn't help anybody.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Change is good. Change is good. Nothing wrong
Yeah.
with that.
Yeah.
And
You have to. Yeah.
and you may learn something from it. And if you don't, fine. But you at least you try something new.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I like
Right.
change. I love it. Okay, next slide.
Yes.
So some of the new challenges that the company's having, and many other companies, especially SMEs, these niche small companies, that with long history, obviously, they've been doing the same thing for many 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 years, is technology. Technology is really kind of forcing a lot of them to reflect again and say, how do we improve, and what are some of the things that we're going to have to adapt into so that we can be competitive. And for this company, it's AI and technologies. Um, the good point is that the CEO understands that this is a challenge and an opportunity as well, is not trying to avoid it. Um, and he's accepting that this is something that he's going to have to consider to keep the company going. Um, he knows that it's sort of a mindset that you have to get into.
Right.
Um,
Right.
Right.
but unfortunately, like many of these niche companies, these hidden champions, um, they haven't discovered just quite yet how to digitally transform
Mm-hmm.
themselves. So hopefully we hear some good news in the next few years from this company that they have discovered how to transform themselves uh,
Right.
Yeah.
to the digital world. Maybe I'm thinking, digitally scanning these documents before or after, showing what they're doing, you know,
Yeah.
potential
And
customers.
also, I believe that companies like this one, they present opportunities for startups here in Japan,
Mm,
startups that work in, let's say, AI and also IT and so on, because
mm,
those startups, if they think or find ways to help such companies digitalize and utilize AI, I believe that they'll find a way to develop their own businesses as well.
yeah, yeah, certainly. I agree. Oh, that's a great great point, because then the startups can see that they can work for
Hmm.
solutions that
Yeah.
these niche companies present. Yeah, yeah.
Yes.
Okay, the next slide, the second to the last slide. Um, some key takeaways that we learned, my research students learned, and myself as well, is that there is a a strong relationship between hidden champions, these SME companies that are very niche, but also entrepreneurial spirit. There is
Yeah.
a way that they can help each other, and like Maya, you said that. Yeah.
Yeah, because these companies, will still be need of their services on the way forward, even when we continue to digitalize and send and keep everything online. There are still pieces of historical, let's say historical pieces that are only on paper or only on scrolls and so on and so on, and they will need to be preserved, right? Not only that,
Mm-hmm.
other documents as well. Funnily enough, I think that a lot of companies still keep papers when it comes to their bookkeeping, also contracts with their workers, and so on and so on. And it's also physical copies are insurance for every company, actually, that they're not going to lose anything if they get a virus, right? So, anyway, these are just some thoughts, random thoughts that come to mind when I listen to you. And
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
I mean,
then.
that great points. Yeah.
Mhm. So even though everybody says we're going online and everything is, in our hard disk and so on and so on, it never hurts to have physical copies of the most important documents you have.
Certainly. Yeah. Yeah. About 5 or 6 years ago, I threw away approximately 500 books.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I had a
Right.
lot of.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, okay, I'm gonna go digital. I'm mindset change. But slowly, I've built my library back up. So I love
Yeah.
books.
Yeah, me too. I did the same, Joe. I went digital and now I'm back, to physical books and
Yeah,
they're piling up in my living room.
we can see a few.
Yeah.
Uh, so the last slide, some reflections on this story of this company. Um, we keep the same takeaways that we did with that we began with, niche focus, resiliency, and such, but with some new additions. After we interviewed the company, is we noticed that uh, they are changing. They know that change is coming, but they're also trying to hold on to the history of Japan, the cultural historical importance of these documents and
Right.
books and such. They don't want to be, like Maya said, completely shift over to digital. There is still some people that find these documents, very appealing and beautiful. Like Tim said earlier, he went to the museum and it made him think about these documents. Like, wow, who curates them and who restores them and who secures them and you know transfer them from museum to museum and such. So um, very beautiful company. I think what they're doing is beautiful for Japan to keep its history and traditional documents, um, but also an opportunity for startups to be able to help, like Maya said, to find digital transformation solutions for what they're doing. So
Yeah.
a wonderful story from a man who lost his job at 35.
All right.
35, and he still stayed in business. He pivoted a couple of times, not only once.
Grit.
Yes, that's
Grit.
a
You need grit.
beautiful story. Yes, of resilience. But
Yeah.
thank you very much, Joe, for letting us know the story. Yes, of this company, and also the CEO of the company, the owner. I believe that he's still the owner, and I do hope that this business continues even after he retires, because we also know that a lot of small and medium-sized businesses here in Japan face this challenge of continuation.
Mm.
And yes, so hopefully more of them will find people willing to take over the business and continue it, and of course continue to pivot whenever pivoting is necessary. So
Right.
thanks a lot for this. And
Thank you, Maya.
well,
Thank you, Tim. Yeah.
yes, thanks to Tim. Tim is on the way to, to the station now. So we are going to have Joe, to have you again in about 3 weeks, I believe.
Yeah.
So I cannot wait to see the next story you prepare for us to learn from and actually appreciate. So, and before, I know that actually it is quite a lot of work for you too, and I appreciate it very much. So thank you for being one of our regular speakers. It's always a pleasure to have you and learn from you. And of course, before we say goodbye, I want to say thank you to our sponsors, both of them, Kanchu, Kanagawa Chuo Jutaku. You can find them at kanachu.com, and you can connect with James Howell on LinkedIn, follow him there, and talk with him about your next idea in the field of real estate. And please do the same with Hannah Urushizawa Howell and Houze Inc. so that they can help you with any of those ideas you come up with. Thanks a lot. And Joe, I'm very much looking forward to the next session with you.
Thank you. Thank you for
Thank you.
the opportunity.
Yeah, thanks a lot to everybody who watched us. Have a great Wednesday, and we'll see you again on Sunday morning with Japanese politics, and of course, next Wednesday morning at 8 o'clock again. See you. Have a great day.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye.